I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the TechCentral Show, the first of 2024. Welcome. TCS is brought to you by MTN Business. Do visit mtnbusiness.co.za for more information about their products and services. Now, the news earlier this week that Convergence Partners, the investment vehicle controlled by the businessman Andile Ngcaba, has acquired Datacentrix, the IT services business that was listed for many years on the JSE and which was later acquired by Alviva Holdings and delisted. Datacentrix is, of course, one of the longest-standing IT services businesses in South Africa. Its CEO is Ahmed Mahomed, and he joins me in the TechCentral studio now to discuss the Convergence Partners deal. Ahmed, great to see you. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Duncan. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Now, Datacentrix, when was it originally founded?
Well, it was listed in 1998 on a JSE. But it was formed, and it comes from the various tables prior to that. So actually looking at the registration documents, we've got two, and the one was listed in 1998, so and the other, I think it was 1995.
95.
But it had different, comes from the names of Joan Joffe and so on. Gerard Ace, Klaas Lammers, you would recall.
Was Joan Joffe involved in the founding of Datacentrix?
She was part of the board. She wasn't involved in the founding, but she was part of the board.
Who founded the business originally?
Well, Gerard and Klaas bought out the operation in Pretoria. I forget the name of that entity at the time, and that's where it started from. So it was in Linwood in the early years.
Right.
I remember traveling 65 kilometers to get to the office in Linwood.
And listed in 98. Of course, there was a tech listings boom in 1998. South Africa kind of predated or ushered in the dot-com bubble in a way, because we had our own mini listings boom in the tech space in 98. And then the US, of course, had its tech bubble 2 years later. Many of the businesses that were listed in that 1998 tech boom, of course, have long gone. So Datacentrix is one of the few survivors of that time. What has been the key to its longevity?
I think we've always run the business for the long term. So even when we're listed, despite all the pressures of listing, we've sort of had the view is, have strategies that will stand you as good state over the long term. There's a lot of different things you can point to the success of the organization over the years. So, and you're right. I jokingly said I think I must be the longest serving CEO of a tech company.
How long have you been CEO?
I think it's 22 years this next year.
Okay.
Oh, it's actually now in January. It's 22 years. Yeah.
That's
so it's a long time.
It's a good innings.
As I said earlier on, I think if it was any other industry, I most probably wouldn't have been here. But the development in technology keeps you on your feet. You've got to think differently. You've got to be agile and so on. And I think we've built that DNA into the business. And obviously we've been ethical, so we've taken the brunt of that in the last 10, 15 years. I remember I think it was 2009, where our public sector revenue just deteriorated significantly overnight. But we navigated that quite well, and it's stood the test of time, I'm glad to say. I think there's some luck involved in it, Duncan, to be sure, but our strategies were right as well.
Yeah, well, of course, too many IT companies were caught up in the state capture era. And Datacentrix never came up once related to public sector contracts, so that's...
it's always challenging. As an entity, we've never engaged in that. We've walked away from significant deals. But, given the climate at the time, you always are in the danger of some rogue individual in your organization doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So we've been very, very disciplined about ensuring we convey the message on a regular basis. And thank God it's stood us in good stead.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So tell me a bit about how the Datacentrix business has changed in the time you've been there. I mean, you alluded to the fact that technology is always forever moving forward. But compared to when you started as CEO 22 years ago, how has the business shifted? And maybe take us through a little bit who your customer base is.
I think it's a significant shift. In the early days when I started, there was largely government. The most of the transactions were in the government space, and it was really commodity driven. In the early 90s, you could sell anything in tech. So You get a faster process as the guys would buy the new notebook or desktop or whatever the case may be. So we sold a lot of commodities in the public sector at this stage. We had a few commercial clients, but nothing to talk about. And it was largely based on commodity sales. So I was saying jokingly to some of my colleagues the other day, I remember the time where we sold 12,000 printers in December to a government department. That's the type of deals we're engaged in. Today it's very different, and we've used an evolutionary process. I think we've tried to build the DNA of the organization around what is good for the customer. So, tech today is very important in business, but applied correctly, it's important. Applied incorrectly, you start having other challenges. And I think the cloud bubble sort of demonstrated that, the cloud first strategy, and you would have been in that, where organizations have taken that approach. Our approach is very, very different and saying what we understand technology and we keep pace with technology. We understand what's happening in the AI space, or data space, or the digital infrastructure space, and. But it's about how you apply that to derive actual business benefit. Now, I'm not saying all our engagements are in that format, but there's a significant amount of engagement where it's a consultative engagement, it's strategic. We've invested significantly in technical capability, solutions architects, the top skills in the market, and we hire some of the best skills in the business. So our people are very core to us, and we've nurtured that over the last 22 years. A lot of my senior leadership team have been, and other members have been with us for 15, 20 years as well. So.
Okay. So the client base today, it sounds like you've transitioned from more of a product box dropping business originally into much more of a services consulting business today. Is that a fair description?
Absolutely. And our strategy from the outset wasn't to drive a acquisitive strategy. I think at the time in the early 2000s and mid-2000s, massive acquisitions in this space. And typically what happens is you find a clash of cultures in those businesses. You can't integrate them correctly, and you get also stuff that you don't want as part of the acquisition.
Yeah.
So we've been very specific about the way we built the business. Strategic acquisitions bolt on to the business, integrated into the business, and ensure that it runs as a seamless engine. So I think that's worked well for us. We don't have competing entities in the business like you've seen with some of our competitors out in the market. When we do a tender or so on, there's one approach from Datacentrix and not five. And we've honed that in that strategy in the last couple of years. And when you engage and a customer engages with a Datacentrix engine, it's a holistic approach in understanding your business and then applying the technologies to give you some business value, business benefit, whatever outcomes you're trying to reach. And in many cases, tech drives business strategy, actually. So in some cases, we're in organizations doing that. Have strategic sessions with them on an annual basis, understand where the business is going. We understand where the technology landscape is going because we deal direct with a number of vendors, so we keep pace with technological developments.
Who are your most important partners in the vendor market?
So we're uniquely positioned. We've got direct relationship with quite a number of the vendors. So the big ones is obviously HPE from a technology stack infrastructure point of view. We have Dell and EMC stack, the Lenovo stack. And that's also been a diversification because historically we only had one vendor. Today we have all the major OEMs and we're highly accredited, so in the top tier echelons of those. And we have an engine that imports directly and configures, ships throughout both SA and Africa where we follow our customers. So if you look at the history of the organization, we've gone from a box drop to building out a business that is actually rich in skills, rich in capability, with a view of saying to a customer, what are your challenges and how do we apply technologies to navigate those challenges? And I'm not saying every engagement is like that. Some are tactical. They come in and say, okay, they need... they need a network solution, but even in that, there's complexity. As much as technology is becoming easier, it's also becoming more complex in the way you design and deploy.
Which are the most important industries that you service? What are the biggest ones?
Yeah, I think the positioning of entities as far as segments are concerned, we play across the segment. So if you look at the digital infrastructure space, whether it's cloud or any of the other technologies, they're fairly generic.
Yes.
In application, even AI technologies. So, it might apply to a different data set, but the way it works and functions is fairly generic. So we operate in the financial sector, in the mining sector, in the agricultural sector, education.
Across the board.
Across the board. And we have started honing in, particularly when it comes to digital solutions into sectors. So, the agricultural applications are different, though the underlying technologies in infrastructure is the same, but the applications that you run on AI and the way you assimilate information and produce that for those environments are different from the mining. They're different from... So we have what we term as Ngcaba, which is annually, whether it's education or mining or, a number of these sectors that we engage particular sectors in.
And you said the public sector business has picked up again.
Starting to pick up. It's we think it should be around 30% of the business. I think that's about the spend of the public sector in terms of total IT spend.
Okay.
So it started, and we've done some significant deals in that space. And it's the more complex deals in that environment that we've been able to deploy.
Yeah. And are you seeing less of that state capture nonsense now in 2023, 2024, or is it still going on?
I think it's a levels of how deep that is. I think globally it's a challenge, to be honest. And I think, it just depends which entity you engage and where you are. We don't get sidetracked with those type of issues. And because we're known as an industry that we don't engage in those type of activities, we will never get approached. So to what extent that is still endemic, I don't know. I think it's improved.
Yeah.
But there's still work to be done, I would think.
Sure. So Datacentrix was listed in 98. It was delisted in 2016?
I think it was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was with the acquisition by Alviva Holdings, which of course is the parent, which was also listed at the time,
yes.
The parent of Pinnacle and Axis, two big distributors in South Africa.
Correct.
How did that acquisition come about, and what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah, it's quite a complex situation, but when we did a transaction for PE purposes in 98, I guess, and there was a top-up tranche later years, as you would know, the way these PE transactions are structured, sometimes it doesn't pan out that the PE companies sit with all of that, so it goes to either the funders and so on. So it ended up that a private institution held a listed company in their portfolio, and obviously they were sitting with a big chunk of that, about 30-odd%. And someone got a wise idea to flock this stake around, and that's how it ended up in Pinnacle.
Okay.
I actually was part of Pinnacle many years ago before I started with. So I ran Pinnacle in the early 2000s. I was the MD there for many years. Yeah.
Okay.
So there was, that's how it rolled out into the.
So you knew the guys.
Group, yeah.
Okay. So that acquisition took place. The business was delisted, and then of course Alviva last year delisted itself from the JSE, and I presume they have now decided that Datacentrix doesn't fit into their core strategy as an unlisted business. So maybe take us through the timeline of how Andile Ngcaba became involved, how the Convergence deal happened, and how Alviva decided. Was it a case of Alviva saying, this is no longer core, let's find a buyer for this business? Or did Convergence come along and say, we're interested in buying this from Alviva, can we do a deal? How did it actually come about?
I think, Duncan, these things are never clear-cut. There's always a combination of factors that comes together that drives a particular outcome. And at the time that Alviva delisted, I think it was opportune for them to look at their portfolio in a delisted environment. We had appetite to take the business out of that environment, and I had discussions with PSPs and the board there. And simultaneously, I know Andile for a very long time. It comes from DD. We've had other discussions. And in fact, it started off with another conversation we had in partnering in a particular area, and we got to talk about Datacentrix, and that's how it unfolded. And in fact, that was almost a year ago that process started. So I started chatting to him. We had appetite because we've been there for 22 years in this thing, and what we didn't want, to be frank, is sit in another entity where we didn't have control of our own destiny, and the stars were aligned for this transaction to happen. So we're ecstatic and excited in terms of what they bring to us. The knowledge that Andile has is significant in the industries, and we think we can leverage some of their capability into our business and vice versa. So I think the cultures are aligned, the ethos is aligned, the value system. And when it comes to acquisitions, in my opinion, is normally it doesn't not work because of the financials. It doesn't work because of the culture fit of entities. But we've got very strong alignment. I've worked with them for over a year in terms of this transaction, or less than a year, sorry, it's not over. And we're very, very comfortable with the entities. We really work well with them to date. Yeah.
So is this a private equity type of arrangement?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
it's a private equity deal. Okay.
That's the CP Convergence Partners is typically
model,
that. Though they have a slightly different flavor, I sense, and Andile is better to speak in it in CP, but I think they focus on the technology space, which brings value to us.
They're also longer-term investors, aren't they? Aren't traditional private equity invest for 5 years and then get out?
That's exactly what I was getting to, is that, I think they take a different view to normal private equities and have a longer horizon in terms of entities out there.
Yeah, so they're not going to flip Datacentrix again in a few years from now. This is a longer-term investment for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's any business at the end of the day, I think we may have a certain view, but confluence of
things change.
Situations and circumstances might learn, but it's not bought as a flip now.
Okay. What is the state of the IT market at the moment? How are things out there? I mean, is it tough, or are things picking up? I know there was a bit of a downturn. There was a bit of a boom around COVID as people started to work from home, and there was demand on solutions around that. And then there was a bit of a slump, particularly in the hardware space.
Yeah.
Are we coming out of that now? Is the market starting to show signs of life?
The predictions out there is sort of around, depending which analyst you talk to, is around 6-7% sort of growth and dividend on the segment. So it is growing at a higher rate than GDP in the market. So there's room for growth there. Given where we position as a business, I think there's room for us to grow and take market share away. So it's one is that 7% increase in spend, but the other is also how can we expand into adjacent areas that will grow our business and give us a bigger market share. And I think the Convergence partnership now will bear us, will bring some benefit for us in that space.
Okay. And I noted in the press release announcing the deal that one of the things you expected to be able to do is to expand your focus on the rest of Africa. How will it do that, and will you be working with other Convergence Partners investment companies to expand your presence on the continent?
Yeah, I think they've got it right to some extent in Africa. It's a difficult environment to operate in. So we do have an Africa presence. I mean, we service a lot of our customers that have a footprint in Africa, and by the way, we have a Middle East presence as well. Okay. So we've done some work there. But what we don't chase is business in those particular countries, and we want to explore how can we unlock that together with Convergence Partners. And there may be entities that's synergistics that we can add value to them, and they can add value to us. But operationally, obviously, the businesses will remain separate. It's about the leadership and the maturity of how do you bring this together for the benefit of the greater group.
Sure. How hands-on is Convergence Partners as an investment firm? I mean, will Andile work closely with you in developing strategy and that sort of thing, and his leadership team at Convergence, or do they take quite a hands-off approach?
That's an interesting question. I guess it will unfold as it unfolds.
As time goes on, yes.
But our discussion, Andile and I, is they want to keep it separate. They like the management team. They like the business. They like the ethos of the business. They're very comfortable with the entity and the way it's positioned in the market. So to the extent that I think where value can be derived through those conversations, we'll explore those. So I don't think they'll get operationally involved in the business. That's certainly not. And in fact, I invited him to the staff meeting when we announced the transaction, and that's the sort of message he gave to it. He's got full confidence in the business, and they're not buying a business that they need to fix. They're buying a business in terms of being able to leverage some of their capabilities and driving additional value through that transaction. So, Andile has got significant knowledge. He spends a lot of time in the US and Silicon Valley. So, if there's AI sort of technologies, develop partnerships that we can develop, we'll explore that as well. But we see in the immediate future some leverage in Africa and understanding how they do that and how can we piggyback on that.
Do you think it'll also open up new clients potentially for the business?
Our time will tell. That's not the reason we've done the transaction. I think we've never looked at our shareholders to unlock that value. But I guess the gravitas of Convergence Partners and Andile as an individual within that entity will lend some better credibility to the organization as well. I would think. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you're in any hurry to list this business again, or if that was a discussion at all that happened in terms of the transaction with Convergence Partners. But Datacentrix was listed on the JSE for many, many, many years. Is a possibility it might return to the bourse at some stage?
I think circumstances will dictate. I think the question was asked to Andile as well, and it's not a strategy to, and not the reason I think Convergence Partners bought it to list it again. But what happens in 4 or 5 years' time will dictate in terms of whether it makes sense against to list or not to list, or continue the business and just build it bigger and bigger into the rest of Africa and globe.
I suppose it really depends on market conditions as well.
Circumstances will do. So we haven't gone into the transaction to say we're going to list it in 3 years' time now. And I think that's the messaging coming from Andile, and it's really more a question they should be answering because they're all 100% of it. But yeah.
Okay. And how big is the Datacentrix business today? I don't know how much you can disclose about revenue and that sort of thing, but maybe some top-line numbers and staff size as well?
Yeah, we're about 1,300 people, largely highly technical skills individuals, whether that's in networking, the digital space, so core data center, cloud, and so on. So about 1,300. From a revenue, I can't obviously divulge those numbers, but it does put us in the top 5 sort of players in the market and edging away quite aggressively. So our strategy is really to target for that number 1 spot. Though I don't drive the business, for me it's about profitable growth rather than just revenue growth. So,
But continuing to eat away market share.
Yeah, we're a strong contender in that space. And we don't play in every single area, so we don't do core ERP systems and so on. But in the market, the digital infrastructure space, the digital solutions areas, we have a significant market share in those particular areas that we play in. So if you look at the vendor landscape, if it's anything to go by, we've been for the last, probably 15, 18 years, top vendor for HPE. We in the top 3 for most of the other vendors as well. Yeah. And then we have partners like OpenText that plays in the data side of the business, which is becoming bigger and bigger for us. And actually is an important facet for most businesses is about the data. And infrastructure is like the car and the engine, you want to run it, but how efficiently can you extract the power and the information out of that data is what we're focusing on. So you'll see our messaging has been around data, and whether that's in the edge or putting it in the cloud, is the debates we're having with our customers, because sometimes you need that information in the edge to facilitate quicker turnaround times, decision-making processes, and so on, particularly in retail environments and so on.
Ahmed Mahomed is CEO of Datacentrix. Thanks for coming to our studio today.
Thanks for having me here, Duncan. Great chatting to you again.